When I was 18 years old, I published this book, and then 3 years later, just this last October at 21, I published this book. At no point in my publishing journey did I even consider querying either of those two books. I always knew I wanted to publish them completely by myself, completely independently. And although there is absolutely nothing wrong with whichever route you choose to go down, whether you want to get your book traditionally published, or if you just go straight into self-publishing, or if you want to get it traditionally published, don't have much success, and then decide to use self-publishing as a backup, there's absolutely nothing wrong with absolutely any of these ways of getting your book published. There's absolutely nothing wrong with choosing any of these. However, I do think self-publishing can sometimes be seen as kind of just a backup, and I'm here to kind of explain why for me it never was. For me, this is the option that makes sense. It's the option that I want to do and I'm continuing to do. You know, I've only just published this second book, you know, in the last few months, but I've already got the next one in the works, and I've kind of announced it on my Instagram as the next book that I'm going to publish. This is also not to say that maybe I'll want to go down the traditional route when I'm older, but right now I have had a great experience with self-publishing, and I kind of want to just explain why I chose it and maybe encourage some of you guys, if you weren't so sure, or you know, if you've had your doubts, or if you just don't know a whole lot about self-publishing. That's why I'm here today. I actually recorded this video initially about a year ago, and then I kind of edited it and never posted it, and I don't really know why, but I went back and watched it, and I've since got things to add to that video. For a little bit of context, in summer last year I graduated, and then I started my first corporate job a couple of months after that, and I've now been there for 4 months. And I think even just that process of kind of exams, graduation, and coming into the real world, I've got a couple of more things to add to this. So I think this is going to be a very helpful video, and yeah, I hope you guys get something out of it. Let me know what you learn in the comments. But as I do have a habit of yapping on in the intro, let's just get right back into the video. The first reason why self-publishing can be so great is that you are not on anyone else's deadline. You set your own deadlines. You are on your own time. You can set your own deadlines of when you want to finish drafts, when you want to finish editing drafts, when you want to send things off to other readers, when you want to publish. You control all of it. Now, obviously, I'm not the best to talk about traditional publishing, but you know, it is commonly known that you're going to have an agent, you're going to be on someone else's deadlines, and you're going to have, you know, to meet those deadlines. And there's not necessarily going to be the same lenience, whereas if you are kind of your own manager. Personally, if I set deadlines for myself, I really want to meet them and not have to push things back. I did have to make an exception for this book because life just got in the way. But again, that's kind of another example of you can set your own deadlines and you can, you know, stick to them and meet them when you can. But if you really cannot, you have got lenience and you've got a bit of leeway there. You know, if something really unexpected comes up in your life, you don't have anyone else dictating what you're doing. If you sat down today and decided, right, I want to write and self-publish a book, and I want to do this all within the space of 3 months, you could do that. And I'm going to put in a disclaimer here. I don't recommend doing that because I feel like that is a very quick turnaround, but you see what I mean. You could do it in a month, or you could do it in 5 years. There's nobody telling you what sort of time you need to be working on. And I think just for most sort of creative people in general, that is amazing because, you know, not everyone is the same. It can often be really hard to kind of give advice in the creative community because everyone's minds work so differently and everyone's minds are so full of inspiration and creativity, but, you know, definitely work in completely different ways. And that's why me saying you've got complete control, it kind of covers all of those aspects because, again, you can do it in as little or as much time as you want. The second reason why I chose to self-publish, and I think when I published my debut novel, this was kind of a very big motivator. I want to say kind of the main reason why I wanted to publish it so badly. And that was, it's fulfilling a dream. I wanted to have my book in my hands. I wanted to be able to say, yeah, I'm a published author. And it's not something I think about a lot when I'm kind of holding my books because I'm so used to, you know, being able to hold these in my hands now. But when I spell it out like that, it really just reminds me that, like, you know, at 17 when I was writing this book, that was all I wanted. And now it's here in my hands, and it has been for the last 3 and a bit years. And that's still kind of insane to me when I sit and deep it. My dream was never to be like a New York Times best-selling author. It was never to be, you know, a famous best-selling author. That's not what it was. I just wanted my book in my hands. Maybe most of you do want to be a best-selling author, and of course that's a valid dream, but I think for me, especially at the time, this was all I wanted. This was all I wanted. And the process of writing and publishing this book took place within the space of, I want to say 9 months. So, you know, from the moment that I kind of realized, oh wait, I can publish this book and have it in my hands, to having it was only 9 months. And I just remember kind of at the start of that process thinking, if I wanted to traditionally publish this, it's gonna take years. And ultimately, let's be real, this book would not have been the one to land me an agent. It would have taken multiple books, multiple drafts, multiple rejections to get anywhere, and that's not what I wanted. At the time, I just wanted my book. And here she is. Kind of following on from that a little bit is number 3, there's no rejection process. You're probably thinking, okay, and because rejection can be good. Rejection is redirection. But again, at the time of writing my debut, I was in the process of applying to universities, and although I actually didn't get any rejections for any universities in the end, and also I'd like to think I have pretty thick skin, so I don't think it would have bothered me that much, but I just think the thought of having rejections in sort of 2 aspects of my life was too much to handle, and I think it would have really gotten to me. I'm not saying this is like a driving reason why you should self-publish. If this is the only reason why you're nervous to traditionally publish, go ahead and go down that route anyway, because rejection is going to be good for you ultimately. But if you're dealing with a lot in your life, maybe other rejections, job applications, and you know, university or school applications, where you know maybe you're going to have other rejections, or just you've got a lot going on in your personal life, and you just know that kind of rejection and negative feedback on top of all of that is going to just make things worse, and that you love the idea of not having to do that and just publishing it yourself, then you know, maybe that's your answer. Number 4, and this is a big one I think for all self-published authors ever, which is creative control. You get to design your covers. You get to determine what graphics go in your book. You get to determine whether or not you have chapter titles. You get to put in fun little quotes. You get to do whatever you want. And for me, that really rung true, and actually in both of these books in 2 different ways, and I will show you now. So in my debut, for a tiny bit of context, basically the book is set over 24 hours, and each chapter is like a different time of day as it goes through the day. So at the start of each chapter, I have a quote that's relating to what time of day it is. And that is not something you would typically see in traditionally published books, I don't think, or maybe it is, but you know, you don't necessarily get to decide that. And it was just something that I really wanted to do once the book was kind of together and I was kind of looking at it as a whole. Also, in the hardback version of this book, there's a map at the front, and each chapter has a little graphic. And then in my second book, it's a young adult set in like the modern day. So there are text messages, there are lock screen notifications, there are playlists, there are Word documents, there's a notes app, there's literally anything conceivable that you have like on your phone on a day-to-day basis. And it's like, you can see them as the characters would see them, and it's absolutely my favorite part of this book. I love it so much, and I think some of my readers have said it's kind of what makes it feel like believable and authentic as, you know, these teenage characters and the main characters. And then on top of that, of course, for both of these, I designed both of the covers, and I got to do that completely myself, and I really enjoyed doing that. You know, initially it was a bit of a skill to learn kind of Photoshop and graphic design, just a little bit for this one. And then I kind of made it a bit more basic with the next one, but I really love where I'm going with these covers, because all the covers are going to be interlinked from now on. So, you know, it's just things like that. I really enjoyed the whole creative process, and I got to do it all myself and make all of the decisions, and I really enjoyed that. And I think it's safe to say that a lot of writers are very creative people, obviously, so, you know, that kind of aspect is going to be really fun for most of you as well. The next aspect is financial freedom, and what I mean by that is kind of, you are free to spend as little or as much as you like. I know some of my friends who spend quite a bit on, you know, editors and then graphic designers and all of that jazz that you could spend money on. Personally, I do an awful lot myself, and some of my editors and readers are just people that I know. I've actually spent very, very little on both of these books being developed. I would say the biggest or kind of only cost really for me were ordering proof copies and then author copies. But this is one of the other things that comes back to kind of ultimately the underlying message of this whole video is the fact that you are your own manager. You get to decide how little or how much you spend. And that kind of leads me on to my next point, which is there's no pressure to publish everything that you write. And there's also just no pressure in terms of like when and how much you're writing. In 2025, I kind of struggled with writing. Obviously, I kind of finished up edits of this book, but in terms of kind of writing from scratch, I very much struggled and I was stuck in a bit of a writer's block. Towards the end of the year, I kind of got my creative spark back and I wrote something that was just for me. I didn't really intend it to be published. Maybe one day it will merge into this kind of series that I have going on. But you know, the intention was, it was just, I'm writing. I'm not writing to put this out in the world. I'm not writing for anyone to see this necessarily. I'm just writing for me. And I think if you've got the pressure and the deadlines of an agent, it's gonna be difficult to kind of write that freely. There's gonna be that constant kind of overarching feeling that you should be writing things that are gonna be published. But again, for me, I'm on my own time and my own deadlines, and you know, even back in 2024, I wrote this draft, which originally I kind of thought maybe it would go down the publishing route. You know, I even got it all the way up to like the last draft and I sent it off to beta readers, but it's still just sitting in my draft because actually I've kind of decided I don't want to do anything with it right now. I don't want to publish it. That's absolutely okay. The next one, and this is my point that I've kind of learned within the last year since recording this video the first time, is that doing something like this, the whole process from, you know, designing the covers, writing the first drafts, editing the drafts, networking to get an audience, networking to find friends who have done similar things, publishing and marketing, just absolutely the whole process is an amazing experience. You will learn so many skills and meet so many people that it's just like, it's a completely invaluable experience. Obviously, after publishing my first book, it then went on my CV, and it was not only, you know, something that really drew in some recruiters when I was searching for jobs kind of post-uni, but it's also just an incredible talking point. I went to a sort of graduate interview day about this time last year, and I think it was pretty obvious kind of early on that I just didn't have the right skill set for this job compared to the other people who were there. And that was fine though, because they were absolutely lovely, and I had this one last interview at the end of the day. And I just remember it was going quite casually. I think we all kind of knew that like I wasn't gonna get this job, and that was okay, but they were still making an effort to be really kind of interested in me and, you know, as formal as possible. And I just remember the guy who's interviewing, it got about halfway through and he started asking about this book and all of my focus on kind of fiction and genre, and it wasn't even related to the job at all because the job was a data analyst role, and he had studied genre in film back in the day, so we kind of had a little bit of that overlap. And I just remember we were talking about that for absolutely ages. You know, it's a really interesting thing to have done in your life. People will be so intrigued. It is a really cool thing to do, quite frankly. I think when I published the first one, I kind of didn't deep how interesting it was, and it took me until like I was having some conversations with people I met at uni in my first year, and they were like whoa, like that's really cool. And it took a couple of those conversations for me to finally kind of realize that, like, yeah, it was really hard, it was difficult, but I did it all by myself and I learned all of these new skills, and it was a really, really rewarding process. And you know, ultimately, because I could put all of those skills and experience on my CV, it's what landed me my current job. Even if I had been studying something like English literature, English language, something more related to books, it's still an insanely interesting thing to have on your CV. And obviously, now that I have this job, it's facilitating me continuing to put effort into these books. So it was just kind of a win-win situation. Now, my final point, which is probably the most fun out of all of them, is that it is so easy. And I know I just talked about how the whole process can be hard, but the process of like uploading your book, and I'm talking specifically about Amazon KDP here, the process of uploading and publishing your book, that part is so simple and so accessible to so many people, especially in 2026. I remember when I published my first book, Amazon KDP didn't even have the option to upload your paperback in advance and then like set a publishing date. So like even within the last 3 years, KDP has gotten just that bit more advanced, and it's so super simple and accessible for so many people that like if you're watching this video, you could do it. I'm really keen to make a video on just how to self-publish, going through the steps on Amazon KDP, but honestly, for the most part, that's kind of unnecessary because Amazon just lays it out super simply. So these are my host of reasons why I chose to self-publish, and you know, why I think you should too if you're kind of at least a little bit debating it. Again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with whichever way you choose to publish your book, but just know that especially in 2026, if you want to self-publish, there is so much help out there and there are so many reasons why you can do it. And hey, if you do decide to self-publish your book, drop it down in the comments because I want to see. But thank you guys so much for tuning into this video. I hope you found it at least a little bit helpful, and I will see you in my next video.